If your spouse faked a car accident to get your fortune, and you were left paralyzed, and then the truth was revealed by your husband's mistress, what would you do? This unbelievable story starts right now. I'll be happy to provide a translation for the sentence you provided. Once upon a time, there was a couple who seemed perfectly ordinary and happy on the surface. But things were not what they seemed on the inside. The wife had inherited a fortune from her parents. A staggering amount of nearly 30 billion Korean won, roughly 30 million United States dollars. At first, she never imagined this money would become such a burden. She simply thought of it as a lifetime of her parents' hard work that she needed to protect. The husband was a very ordinary office worker. To those around him, he was always seen as a hard-working and caring husband. On the outside, they looked like a perfect match. Their neighbors were often envious, saying things like, "They have nothing to worry about. They're rich, and the husband is so kind." But people are often unpredictable. The husband had a different motive brewing inside. The enormous fortune blinded him. What's more, his younger brother also lusted after his sister-in-law's wealth. The two of them would often secretly talk about getting their hands on her money. The wife was completely unaware of their scheming at the time. Then, one day, a terrible accident occurred. On her way back from grocery shopping, just like any other day, she got into a car accident. At first, everyone thought it was just a random misfortune. But the outcome was far too cruel. When the wife woke up, her lower body was paralyzed. The doctor's diagnosis was blunt: "You will never walk again." The news made the wife feel like her world had crumbled. The husband pretended to be deeply shocked. With tears in his eyes, he held his wife's hand and promised, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." To outsiders, it looked like a truly touching display of spousal devotion. But inside, he felt relief. He thought that if his wife was confined to a bed, the authority to manage her assets would naturally fall to him. The brother-in-law was no different. Under the pretense of visiting the hospital, he would subtly bring up the topic of money. "Sister-in-law, don't worry, my brother. And I will help you with your finances from now on." He would say this with a sly smile. On the surface, he was a caring family member. But inside, his mind was filled with calculations. At first, the wife wanted to believe them. She thought her husband was being more caring because of her condition, and her brother-in-law was helping because they were family. But as time passed, she started to feel that something was off. The husband kept bringing up her assets, subtly suggesting they sell the house, sell the land, and change her stocks. He was cleverly taking advantage of her vulnerable state. It was then that a tiny seed of doubt began to sprout in the wife's mind. But no one could have imagined that this doubt would lead to such a horrifying truth. Around that time, the wife began to notice a change in her husband. He started coming home later, having been so devoted to her before. He gave excuses about being busy at work or meeting clients. But the wife couldn't check on him because of her condition. She had no choice but to trust his words. However, rumors began to circulate among the neighbors that the husband wasn't alone. They had seen him with a young woman, dining or driving around together. At first, the wife didn't want to believe it. "My husband couldn't possibly do that," she thought. But her unease grew steadily. It turned out the husband had been seeing this woman for a long time. She had trusted his every word, waiting for him. He had repeatedly promised her he would soon divorce his wife, and that they would share the money together. The woman believed it was true love. But as time went on, the husband never followed through on his promises. The turning point was when the husband finally turned his back on her as well. He had moved on to someone else. His true desire was never for love, but for money. His wife's fortune was the most reliable prey, and the mistress was merely a tool to satisfy his greed. When the woman found out, she was filled with rage. "I waited all this time, and you're just going to abandon me?" Her pride was shattered, and most of all, she was disgusted by his two-faced nature. Then, by chance, she overheard a conversation between the husband and his younger brother. It contained an unbelievable confession. "That car accident with my wife, that worked out well, right? No one suspects a thing. Once we get a handle on her money, we'll be set for life." The woman couldn't believe her ears. She thought it was just a normal accident. But they had faked it to leave the wife paralyzed. She froze in place, no matter how much she resented him. This was something a human being should never do. Filled with rage and betrayal, the woman agonized for days. Should she pretend she didn't know and just leave, or should she reveal the truth? In the end, she couldn't stand by and do nothing. Her husband had not only wronged her, but had also destroyed an innocent woman's life. So she made a decision. She would tell the wife the whole truth. One day, while the husband was out, the woman quietly went to the wife's house. The wife was surprised by the sudden visit, but being alone, she let her in. The two women sat face to face for the first time. An awkward silence hung in the air at first, but soon, the woman couldn't hold back her anger any longer. "I have something to tell you. It might be shocking, but you need to know the truth." She then recounted the entire story of the husband and his brother's plot to cause the accident. At first, the wife couldn't believe it. "That can't be true. My husband, my brother-in-law, how could they do such a thing?" But looking into the woman's eyes and hearing her trembling voice, the wife knew it wasn't a joke or a lie. The woman even provided specific details from the conversations she had overheard and the husband's manipulative behavior she had witnessed. It was impossible to deny. In that moment, the wife's body trembled and her heart felt like it would explode. The man she thought would be with her for life, the man who had promised to protect her, was in fact her worst enemy. Betrayal and rage washed over her all at once. But she couldn't just cry. The wife gritted her teeth and made a decision. "I won't let this go. They must pay for what they've done." Then, the woman said, "I'll help you. I was betrayed by him too." Her words were genuine. From that moment on, the two women, who were both betrayed, became allies. From that day on, the wife and the woman started meeting in secret. Their circumstances were different, but a shared sense of rage and betrayal united them. They quickly became a team. At first, the wife was so devastated and furious that all she could do was cry. But after a while, her perspective changed. "These tears won't change anything. The only thing I can do is get revenge." That was her new resolve. The mistress felt the same. She had been used and abandoned by the husband, and she thought it would be better to expose all of his lies to the world. So she began to reveal the husband's weaknesses one by one. She told the wife everything when and where he had talked about the accident, what evidence he had hidden, and even the private conversations he had with his brother. Hearing the stories, the wife's body trembled once again. But this time it was not from fear, but from determination. "I can't act on my own, but there are plenty of ways to make this right." So, the two women meticulously planned their revenge. First, the wife found a trustworthy lawyer. On the surface, she was just seeking advice on asset management, but her true goal was to investigate her husband's financial misconduct and the suspicious accident. When the lawyer heard the story, he was astonished. If this is true, they must be held accountable by law. At the same time, the mistress gathered all the evidence she had secretly kept. She had a recording of the husband talking about the accident, screenshots of his messages with his brother, and records of their financial transactions. The evidence was so irrefutable that there was no way the husband could escape. The wife's body was weak, but her mind was sharper than ever. She looked even more determined in her wheelchair. No one around her knew the quiet woman was a warrior, nurturing a great fire of revenge inside her. The plan proceeded step by step. The wife brought up the topic of managing her assets to the husband. It was a tempting bait for him. The husband must have been overjoyed, thinking things were finally going his way. But it was a trap the wife had set. Every conversation was secretly recorded. The husband couldn't hide his greed, and he openly conspired with his brother. He even said things like, "Soon, all of this will be mine." No more evidence was needed. The decisive moment came when the documents collected by the wife and the mistress were submitted to the police. Simultaneously, some of the information was leaked to the media, leading to articles questioning whether the car crash was truly an accident. The husband and his brother were taken by surprise. At first, they vehemently denied everything. But as the evidence mounted, they were left speechless. They were eventually caught in the police investigation. It was then that people realized the truth. A hidden betrayal and a serious crime were lurking beneath the surface of that seemingly ordinary family. The neighbors were shocked, too. That man who seemed so kind actually did that? They shook their heads in disbelief. The wife was in the courtroom, sitting in her wheelchair. But she looked more dignified and determined than ever. It was as if she were saying, "My body may have been broken, but my spirit and will are unbreakable." The mistress was also present. Although she had been on the wrong path, she had ultimately helped expose the truth. She, too, had a chance to start a new life. Afterward, the wife reorganized her assets and managed them meticulously, so that no one could take advantage of her again. Most importantly, she learned a painful lesson. You can't trust a person just by their appearance. Their true heart is revealed through their actions. People around her began to admire her, not just as a wealthy woman, but as a strong person who had endured life's hardships with unwavering resolve. In the end, the wife left these final words: "My body may be injured, but my soul is not defeated." I want to say this to all greedy people in the world. Remember that the moment you try to take what belongs to others, your own greed will ultimately destroy you. And so, the story came to an end, leaving a profound lesson for everyone who heard it. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story.